From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And ahead today, K-State's Glynn Tonsor commenting on the cattle market trends. Glynn will talk about last week's improvement in fed cattle prices, and he'll go over several new indicators of U.S. beef demand, domestically and abroad. Also, K-State's Allen Featherstone discusses current trends in agricultural lending, especially as impacted by the economic effects of the pandemic. That's the theme of Allen's presentation later today as part of K-State's virtual Risk and Profit Conference, and they're still taking registrations for that. Further ahead, Jeff Wickman with this week's 4-H segment as he'll talk with K-State's Amy Sollock about the start of another new 4-H year in October. All that and more right here on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
This is Agriculture Today, coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University. And to open up our Monday edition, it's to the cattle markets and observations from our guest, livestock economist with K-State Research and Extension, Glynn Tonsor. And it's always even more uplifting, Glynn, when we can start our conversation with a nice bump in the cash fed cattle trade last week. The market has reached that psychologically important, if nothing else, $100 mark.
Yes. So anytime we can talk positive or improving prices and ongoing heavy volumes of cattle being processed, that sets the tone to a more positive interview, which is what we're going to do here. So that's good. In the cash space, yes, we have broke the $100. So the 5-area price through the end of Thursday was a little over $100 higher for the week, as we said, $2 to $3 higher. On the board, August live cattle contract was just under 103 for the week, so about flat. And then to flip back over to feeder cattle, cash feeder cattle here in Kansas, AMS called 2 to 4. Actually, one lot was $6 higher. In Salina, 2 lots I took note of here. Largest lot with 685 head, weighing 817, came in at 146. And another large lot, 372 head, weighing 961, came in at 134. Those would be up from the prior week. We look over to the board again. August feeder cattle, 143 and about a half, flat for the week. And then finally, the cutout was basically flat for the week. Choice is 205, select 192. I think it's good. And I said this actually, I think maybe a month ago, last time you and I did this, was there's nothing necessarily sexy here, but flat. We're moving a lot of animals. Market's still flat to up. That has a positive undertone to it compared to where we were. And that makes me a little optimistic about some demand signals.
If movement is perking along, as you're suggesting, that would say that the processing of cattle is starting to return to something resembling normal.
Yes. So sitting here right now, we have preliminary estimates from USDA is for the week through Saturday, 633,000 head. That'd be down just a few thousand from the week before, down about 15,000 from a year before. Embedded in that, we're very close to year-over-year volume rates. For the total for the year, we're now about 5% lower on cattle that have been harvested. So we continue to eat away at this. A rational question that comes from this has been weighing on the markets for some time, is exactly how many carryover animals do we have in the feed yard space? So a little over a week ago, I used the latest cattle on feed report as well as the weekly federal inspected slaughter numbers to approximate what I think August 1st and potentially September 1st situation will look like if we manage to run at 650,000 head a week, which would be a little bit more improvement where we're at now. So I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying if we can pull it off, then we would have started August with over 800,000 head in the yards that we quote unquote wish weren't there. They were carried over. We would get to Labor Day with right about 300,000 head. Conversely, if over the next month we have about 625,000 head harvested per week, then we'll get to Labor Day with 425,000 head in inventory that we didn't want to have in inventory. So what I mean by that is heavy animals that we would have hoped to have marketed in a prior month. Most of our listeners know 800,000 to some even said 1.2 million was the carryover number a couple months back. So we continue to chip away at this. And we have a really good chance that by the time we get to Labor Day, we have much more manageable carryover numbers. We will have carryover numbers, but what I was mapping out there was prospects for 3 to maybe 400,000 head carryover, and that's getting a little bit more manageable for the industry. It's not to dismiss the fact there are some yards with them, and it's not free to have carryovers, but the aggregate pressure on the market isn't as strong as it once was, and I think we're seeing that in the undertone of the markets in general.
But there are, as you say, a couple of unknowns as per keeping the train moving, if you will. So still to be determined.
So the industry's pressing hard, and we're still not quite where we were a year ago. That's not free. There's a lot of things in place, and the labor availability and the ability to keep that throughput going is something we certainly can't take for granted. The second one, just as a geeky aside, is the monthly cattle on feed reports don't include all feed yards. It's only those over 1,000 head. And as a rough rule of thumb, we think about 20% of the industry's inventory is in those smaller yards, the yards that are under 1,000. So I've assumed that in the calculus that is mapped out for us. But here in COVID, we actually don't have a good updated estimate of that 20% number. If it was really 15% instead of 20, the carryover situation is actually better. Conversely, if it was 25%, it's worse because those are animals that aren't showing up in those monthly reports. So that's a nugget to watch going forward as well.
Very well. We do want to let folks know that you have the updated feedlot cattle returns numbers due out soon.
Yeah, they should be out later this week. Again, there's different pieces of USDA information that comes into that. I'm not expecting a drastically different story than a month ago, maybe slightly better. But it's mainly just a reminder for our listeners to watch for that on agmanager.info.
And the hint there is that we will see improved returns as we press on forward through 2020. That's still the storyline?
That's what we're hoping for, and I anticipate the numbers will bear out at that time.
Right. Be looking for that later on this week on agmanager.info. Now to the demand side, and you have quite a volume of information here from the USDA and otherwise indicating where we stand domestically and on the export front. What do the numbers tell us, Glynn?
Yeah, so there are multiple pieces here, and I'm just trying to highlight those that are fellow geeks. Please go to Ag Manager and do a deeper dive. One of the things I maintain there is lagged information that comes from USDA databases. And for example, the most recent available is May. And in about a week, I'll be able to update that through June. And in May, domestic beef demand was down 10% from the prior year. And export beef demand in May was down almost a third, which that was a notable shock, part of the pessimism in the markets at the time. That's lagged information, right? So we got to keep that in mind. In some sense, that's already cooked into the books. The markets have moved on, but we're just pegging why the markets did what they did, basically, in that story. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll share here, though, is the Meat Demand Monitor, which is a different project. It's survey-based, beef and pork checkoff funded, gives us some more contemporary insight. And actually, on August 4th, we posted what we call the July report. So that was what was going on with consumers in the month of July. So again, it's more recent. And the good news there is all the products we look at, which include ribeye steak and ground beef demand from a beef perspective, retail demand was up in July compared to June. That is a positive signal. It was embedded in the tone I kind of kicked off our session here with. Food service is a bit mixed. To me, that's not surprising because you still have some mixed comfort level of folks going back to restaurants. Sit-down dinner is a much bigger deal for ribeye steak demand, for example. Then, that's not a typical drive-through kind of meal. So you have the same kind of carryover in some of those products. Some of the other nuggets that are in this most recent report that I think are noteworthy is consumers are changing behavior on some things. So there are some that are buying different types of products, keeping higher volume of products on hand at home, increasing their cleaning and sanitation of the packaging. All those kind of things are talked about in these reports. But what I want to highlight for our listeners is beef, pork changes in that front really aren't different than broader food category. So consumers don't appear to be overly concerned about beef and pork cleanliness or beef and pork availability compared to the broader food category. I think there's a general rationale that, working through a pandemic, we want to have more subsistence food at home, but that's not unique to meat is what I'm trying to impress on our listeners. And that's actually a good thing because of some of the commentary in the media in the month of May around disruptions on the availability that could have spilled over into bigger concerns for consumers. And I haven't seen that show up yet. So that's actually a very positive. We've avoided a bigger problem is one way to think about that. And that's important.
And that same meat demand monitor, Glynn, also has capsulized the demand picture for the months of February through June. So in essence, the core of the pandemic. And what nuggets do you take from that information?
Yeah, so the unique thing of this is we're daily capturing information. Yes, it started February pre-pandemic. And grocery demand peaked in April. Food service meat demand was lowest in April. Several might think that's a no-brainer statement, but it was confirmed here, and it's meat specific, so it's important to recognize that. Taste, freshness, safety, and price regularly are most important when we come to assessing protein purchasing decisions. The importance of price has grown. That's not surprising to me at all, given the macroeconomic uncertainties. Price sensitivity in general is probably going to grow as long as we're in this current macroeconomic environment. So that's important to keep in mind. And perhaps most positive here is the overall inclusion of beef and pork in U.S. residents' daily meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, has actually remained pretty steady. And it was held steady in part because consumers hit the shelves hard early in April. They filled up their home pantry, freezer, and fridges, and were able to kind of smooth their consumption. And that is good because we haven't had the same kind of pullback on consumption that you would have otherwise. So that's important. I'm trying to kind of connect all the dots because most of our listeners remember in April and May, the commentary here was much different. And there's a lot of positive things out of this meat demand story that have actually developed.
And that's a good note on which to remind folks that you will be sharing this type of information and much more during your session as part of the 2020 K-State Risk and Profit Conference later on this week. And that'll include your updated outlook on the price trends, correct?
That's correct. So in classic Zoom fashion, we're going to shrink, try to get the big points across in a little bit less death by lecture style. I'm going to try to summarize the COVID impact to date, the outlook situation, and then take questions. So yes, those that have interest in the meat and livestock space, please join us. As you said, Thursday. All the details are on our agmanager.info website.
And we will be discussing risk and profit as we go along here throughout the broadcast today. But Glynn's on board Thursday, August the 13th, the first session of the Risk and Profit Conference for that day. Glynn, good luck with that presentation, and thanks as always for your input.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
That visit with livestock economist Glynn Tonsor of K-State Research and Extension. He's among those who provide their observations on the cattle market trends for us each Monday here on Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. We're back now on This Agriculture Today, and along with us here is the head of the Agricultural Economics Department here at Kansas State University, Allen Featherstone. Allen will be featured later on today, as a matter of fact, on that online 2020 Risk and Profit Conference out of Kansas State University. And there's still time for you to enroll and take part in this program, and we'll tell you more about that. But we brought Allen by today to spend a few moments delving into the topic that he'll be addressing in full at Risk and Profit here in a couple of hours, actually, Allen. That is the agricultural finance situation. Now, that's a huge and sprawling topic, but what are the kinds of things you're keying on as you address where we are financially in agriculture?
There's a couple things we're going to look at when I think about the agricultural financial situation. Certainly the wherewithal and financial stability of the farming sector, the production agriculture sector is important. But the other aspect is the credit side. And so in terms of how are the financial institutions doing, is there going to be credit for agriculture? Certainly what are their perceptions of where we are from the pandemic situation? And so we're going to take a look both at the situation from the farm side, but also we have some new information with regards to perceptions that lenders have as we move forward through the rest of the year and into 2021.
If we might then allow a bit of a flavor on each of those sides, the farm financial side of things, and everybody is of an understanding that these are not rosy times out on the farm or ranch.
They certainly aren't rosy at this point, but in terms of at the end of 2019, we were probably as good a financial shape as we've been probably over the last 5-6 years. In terms of the net farm income for 2019 was over $110,000. Certainly individuals were probably not pleased with regards to the amount of money that was coming from the federal government, with essentially 50% of their net farm income was from the MFP payments, another 20% roughly from the other government program payments. But certainly cash does spend, and the fact that it helped solidify the liquidity position, the leverage position, and in some respects to at least enter the situation relatively good, I think is a positive. But certainly where we are right now and looking forward, certainly there's a lot of concern. And probably the big thing that is out there, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion throughout the week looking at this, is just where we are from a financial government program payments and whether or not there will be anything like MFP. And that certainly the CARES Act provided some funding and the money to agriculture, but a lot of issues still there.
And to that point, you interact with peers around the nation, as a matter of fact, and talk these matters over. Do we have any sense of the pandemic's impact on the on-farm economy?
Certainly it has been large, and it has been drastic in terms of you look at it from some of the FAPRI numbers, and essentially you're probably looking at a 30 to 40% drop in net farm income than what was expected. The other thing is depending on what industry you are, for example, for the crop producer, essentially the money was on inventories that you had on hand, which essentially just solidifies the 2019 income as opposed to the 2020. And so in some respects, the crop producer really hasn't received anything forward looking for the 2020 year. It was just basically to make sure that the accrual number of 110,000 did occur. From the livestock sector, the payments were through mid-April, mid-May, that region, and there's been a lot of time that has passed since then. And so just a lot of uncertainty, and prices have not recovered to pre-pandemic levels in any manner.
Now, you as well are tuned into the other side of the coin that you'll discuss at Risk and Profit, and that is the lending climate out there. There have been some reports out, Federal Reserve Bank being among them recently, trying to outline that. But what's your perception of that lending situation?
One of the things we'll look at is a recent survey that we completed in March nationwide to lenders trying to get their perceptions. And in some respects, the Federal Reserve has a strong focus on commercial banks, which are an important part of the sector. Our survey is a little bit broader in terms of we do get farm credit in there. We get some of the non-traditional credit suppliers in the survey and get information from them to get a broader picture of just what are the thoughts with regards to over the last 3 months, given that it was in May. Essentially, they kind of had that March, April, May period, and so they could give a little bit of information in terms of what they saw during the early stages of the coronavirus situation. But then, probably more important, we have them looking out a year and also 2 to 5 years into the future to try to brainstorm. The big thing is lots of uncertainty. The other thing is we do this survey roughly every 6 months, and the results from this are obviously more negative than they were the last time we did it, just around fall harvest time.
So it's not a question of whether credit is tightening. It's to what degree it's tightening? It's
to what degree, and just a lot of uncertainty in terms of what they're going to see from a bankruptcy perspective, also what they're going to see from a competitive perspective. One of the things we'll talk about is that the margins are tightening for financial institutions, and so just a lot of concern in terms of where land values are going to go. Ultimately, if there aren't government program payments, I think that's going to put quite a bit of pressure on agricultural land values. And not only will I cover that a little bit, but there will also be a session on land values presented by Michael Taylor and some of the graduate students she's doing research with.
And specifically, she'll be on board to talk about that during the Wednesday session of Risk and Profit. But as folks take in your offerings this afternoon, what do you hope they they walk away from it with?
I think the big hope we have is just a stronger understanding of where we are. Again, given where we are, it can be pretty easy to be pretty pessimistic. I think it is important to realize that we were in a relatively strong position going in, and so a lot of our farm producers are going to have the wherewithal to certainly forge through 2020 and begin to think about what changes need to be made in their operations as they look into 2021.
Yeah. So looking forward to your presentation, and in just a few moments we'll run down the risk and profit agenda one more time for those who want to take it in. So good luck with it later on today and with the program in total. Thanks so much for coming over.
Thank you, Eric.
Allen Featherstone, he's the head of the Agricultural Economics Department at Kansas State University, and that department will be hosting online, starting at noon today, the 2020 Risk and Profit Conference out of the university. Again, Allen's up to bat this afternoon, addressing the ag finance situation. Preceding him will be K-State's Brian Coffey, reviewing his recent analysis covering 10 years of hedging the sale of Kansas live cattle. Tomorrow's session, then, begins at noon. K-State's Brian Brigham on the macroeconomy, interest rates, and future inflation. He'll be followed by K-State's Vincent Amanor-Boadu, Kara Ross, and Catherine Ofori-Ba. They'll look at U.S. agri-food trade and COVID-19. On Wednesday, then, starting at noon, as mentioned earlier by Allen, K-State's Michael Taylor and Chelsea Arnold on crop share or cash rent. How does risk affect that decision? Pairing up with them on Wednesday, K-State's Jody Wendt and John Leatherman. They'll offer an assessment of agriculture's contribution to the Kansas economy. Then that expanded session on Thursday. It'll start at 10:30 in the morning. Once more, K-State's Glynn Tonsor with the livestock market outlook, followed by his counterpart Dan O'Brien with the grain market outlook. At noon on Thursday, the program breaks out into an open chat with K-State Agricultural Economics Extension specialists. You can again go one-on-one with a specialist on a topic of your choice. Thursday's session concludes with a look at non-traditional finance. K-State's Jenny Ift with that, and projections of net farm income for 2020 and 21 from K-State's Greg Eibendahl. The conference concludes with the Friday session, K-State's Nathan Hendricks and Mary Kurzweil. They'll offer a look at the economic losses from the ARC PLC election in the 2014 Farm Bill, and concluding the overall program, K-State's Dan O'Brien back with Guy Allen as they'll look at the international grain market trends and factors. That is the multi-session Risk and Profit Conference 2020. You can join in on the program any time, but we'd encourage you to go ahead and get registered as soon as possible. $30, covering access to the conference and associated materials. The quickest way to take care of that registration is to contact K-State's Rich Llewellyn. His email address is rvl@ksu.edu, rvl@ksu.edu. And again, all of the information on the conference is available to you at agmanager.info. We do hope you'll take full advantage of this exceptional program. We'll break away now and then return with more for you here on this Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Now for you, today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer is planning on holding a video conference with China's Vice Premier to talk about the Phase 1 agreement coming Saturday. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. The report stated a key element in the talks will be hitting China's target for agricultural exports. China has a long way to go to hit that projected $36.5 billion or so, which was promised for 2020. The U.S. Census Bureau reported last week that China had bought $7.2 billion in U.S. agricultural products during the first 6 months of the year. That's about $433 million higher than the same period a year ago. Now, U.S. agricultural exports were reported down in the month of June to $9.9 billion. That's the lowest sales total since May of 2016. Combined with imports, the U.S. set a record monthly trade deficit in June at $1.1 billion. The cumulative agricultural exports for fiscal year 20 right at $102 billion against imports of just over $100 billion for a trade surplus of just $1.7 billion, with the fiscal year running from October 1 to September the 30th. In order to meet the USDA's fiscal 20 ag export forecast of $136.5 billion, exports would now have to average $11.4 billion from July through September. And July included at least 2 record-breaking corn sales to China, bringing China's total buys for the marketing year to 225 million bushels. Most of those purchases for China have been new crop sales. Those will not show up on census data until the shipments actually move. And looking at soybean sales, the Census Bureau reports that China had purchased $1.3 billion worth of soybeans, down 54% from the $2.9 billion that China bought over the first 6 months of 2019. Overall, U.S. soybean exports for the 1920 crop are the lowest in at least 6 years, potentially the past 7 years, depending on how the 1920 marketing year ends. Now, one area where China continues to exceed expectations is in purchases of U.S. pork, which have exploded for the first 6 months of this year. Through the end of June, the U.S. had sold $1.3 billion in pork to China. That's $62 million more than the U.S. sold to China in all of 2019. Well, it appears regarding national categories that agricultural land values and cash rent levels for this year mirror those from 2019. That's according to a USDA economist. Here's more from the USDA's Rod Bain.
No change. The theme of this year's edition of USDA's Agricultural Land Values Report. As Deputy Chief Economist Cindy Nickerson explains,
in 2020, the average farm real estate values, which includes both land and buildings, stayed perfectly constant with 2019 at $3,160 on average per acre. In terms of cropland, on a national basis, again, it was constant, valued at $4,100 per acre on average, and pasture land remained constant at $1,400 an acre nationally.
She adds in terms of no year-over-year change in the major land value categories.
Farmland values are an asset that incorporates the ability of the land to earn rents far into the future. So it's not the type of barometer that's going to change on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, as prices would, for example, prices for commodities.
The Agriculture Department's annual look at agricultural cash rents shows that compared to the previous year,
nationally, the cropland cash rent averages held steady at about $139 per acre.
Nickerson says regarding year-over-year comparisons related to cash rents for both irrigated and non-irrigated acres.
In 2019, cropland values on irrigated farmland were $220 per acre, and it dropped to $216, which is more in line with the values in 2018. Non-irrigated cropland followed a similar pattern and only dropped $1 on a national level from $127 per acre in 2019 down to $126 per acre in 2020.
Also showing no change from 2019, cash rents for pasture land remaining at $13 an acre. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Cattle producers, that pair of Kansas Livestock Association, Kansas State University Ranch Management Field Days are upcoming, the first of which is this Thursday, August the 13th, near Smith Center. It'll include discussions on leveraging genetics to achieve cow herd objectives, managing and planning for tough economic times, and more. This event will be hosted by W&S Ranch, owned and operated by the Weltmer family. Select Sire's beef sire analyst John Herrick will lead off the program, and he'll be taking a look at how genetics can be leveraged to increase the profitability of an operation. The presentation to cover how to tailor trait selection and capitalize on the genetic and reproductive tools available. From the Kansas Farm Management Association, Mark Wood will share how ranchers can better prepare and plan for challenging economic times rather than just reacting to them. And K-State's Justin Wagner will discuss nutrition management steps that need to be considered during the post-weaning stage. He'll also be highlighting some of the successes that W&S Ranch has had in leveraging nutrition to achieve their cattle weight gain goals. Finally, from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Kelsey Olson will provide an update on the resources that the KDA has compiled to assist Kansas producers in managing stress, financial and legal challenges, and other issues. The field day will start at 3 o'clock with registration, and it'll conclude with the free beef dinner at 6:45. The W&S Ranch is located southeast of Smith Center. Look for the directional signs along either U.S. Highway 36 or U.S. Highway 281, depending on how you're approaching Smith Center. Now, the second in the 2020 Field Day Series will be held a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, August the 18th, near Uniontown. Educational sessions there will include a panel discussion on the utilization of cover crop grazing systems, an outlook on the markets and the factors that affect them, optimizing cow herd efficiency, and combating ag stress. This event will be hosted by G3 Cattle Company, owned by the George family, and held in honor of Darrell George, that again near Uniontown in southeast Kansas. If you'd like to know more about the details, including the social distancing protocol and everything included in the field day layout, you can find out everything at www.kla.org. K-State KLA Ranch Management Field Days coming up very soon. KLA.org. This is Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. In addition to a new school year getting underway, the new Kansas 4-H year begins in October. As kids and parents decide on extracurricular activities, Southwest Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Amy Sollock encourages them to consider 4-H because it offers a variety of educational and social interaction opportunities. Amy, it's back to school time, and although it may be a little bit different than it's been in the past in terms of some of the things that students will have to do, this is also one of the times when the parents start thinking about, and the children start thinking about, what other things can they do in conjunction with school, some of those extracurricular activities, and 4-H is a great option.
Yeah, we know there's a lot of different organizations for kids to get involved with. We obviously feel very strongly about kids receiving lots and lots of benefits from the 4-H program. So back to school time is certainly a time of year when parents are looking for certain activities for their families to enjoy.
One of the things that is nice about 4-H is the fact that it offers that connection with the group, but it also gives them a chance to really get involved with things that they enjoy doing.
Absolutely. You know, we've got over 30 different 4-H project areas that kids can explore and find their interest area and kind of develop a love for a given project area. And the great thing about that is that even if you have multiple kids, you can all participate in the same program. You don't have to take them to different things, right? So if you have one child that's really interested in photography and you have another that's very curious about rocketry, why you can all go to 4-H and we can still make that happen.
You mentioned a lot of things that are kind of human interest type activities and things that really spark that creativity in a child.
Yeah, we really believe passionately about finding that spark for a given child. So we are all about exploring different interest areas, trying new things, sampling a lot of different hobbies. And in that process, they really develop a passion, and it kind of ignites that spark that they find. And that really leads to a really long and rich path of discovering, and oftentimes it turns into a possible career.
Well, and 4-H is wonderful because it gets children involved in a young age, and they can really age through this as they go through high school.
Absolutely. So you've got to be 7 by January 1 and on through high school, and you can join it at any point. So whether you start out right at the gate at age 7 or you don't find it until junior high or high school, and that's okay. And like I said, it just connects you with really caring adults that sort of further your love for a specific project area and puts you in connection with all kinds of resources, possible careers, and even higher learning, college pathways, etc.
A lot of focus on leadership capabilities as well.
Yes, we start that very early in 4-H. We really believe in youth empowerment and finding the child's voice and letting them sort of, learn and practice those leadership skills from very early on. If a child is particularly shy, maybe at the beginning, just answering roll call or being able to vote on a decision at a club meeting is a big deal. But we definitely have lots of opportunities for youth engagement and youth leadership. They really strengthen their communication skills, and it's really wonderful to see kids thrive in the 4-H program.
We are hoping that things will go well this fall and the school will run the way it's supposed to, that 4-H will run the way that it's supposed to. But if something should happen, the situation should change, 4-H right now is actually positioned very well to meet the challenges.
Yeah, we learned a lot over this past spring and summer 4-H season. And, while we definitely love gathering in person and enjoy building those relationships face-to-face, we definitely know that 4-H can look a little different now, and it can still be successful. And we are right now training and equipping our different volunteers with the right resources and the right tools to do just that if we should find ourselves in a situation this fall or winter where we need to do 4-H from home again.
I think we've heard a lot about the hybrid programming, and that's really kind of what 4-H has moved to in some cases.
Yeah, I think we all prefer in person, but we also need to keep everyone's safety as our top priority for not only the kids, but the volunteers and leaders. So if there's a combination that works right for a particular set of families, then they can determine that and go at their own pace.
And some of these things can be done in small groups, so you don't always have to have the large group gathering.
Yeah, especially project learning, right? So our clubs typically gather once a month, and we've had lots of clubs across the state who've decided to move that virtually and, on a different variety of platforms. The project learning can take place in much smaller settings. If you've got a handful of kids that are really interested in baking, there's no reason if it's, done properly with good protocol that those couple of children couldn't get together and learn that way. Or, a lot of our activities take place outdoors where it's much easier to maintain social distancing. So we look for opportunities to, maintain those safety protocols, but also continue to carry on and provide the learning and the engagement that we know kids need.
And these 4-H volunteers and mentors, as I like to call them, really have a lot of knowledge, and that's something that the kids benefit from greatly.
Yeah. We ask volunteers, anybody that's got a specific content, knowledge, or just people that want to give back, and we train all of our volunteers. We screen all of our volunteers to ensure a safe environment for both them and the children. And it's one of my most fulfilling aspects of my job, when I can find adults and give them the proper training and the proper resources to work with kids, and then to see those kids sort of, develop a love for a given project area because of that volunteer. It's a pretty magical thing. We don't know who's learning more from who, whether it's the child learning from the volunteer or the volunteer certainly learns from the kids as well.
There are a lot of ways to learn about 4-H in the local area. Probably the best way is to just talk to someone who is in 4-H, but they can also go to the website.
Yes, absolutely. So visit with your local K-State Research and Extension office. We really don't want to be the best kept secret, and we've heard that for years. And so we're trying to make ourselves as available as possible to everyone because we believe that all kids across the state deserve an opportunity to participate in 4-H. So visit kansas4-h.org, and from there's several different ways to get in connection with a local 4-H club.
And as we mentioned, it actually starts in October, but think about it ahead of time.
Yeah, our new 4-H year begins October 1st, but a lot of families, like I said, start looking for opportunities when it's back to school time, and you can certainly check out a couple different clubs that are available in your community to find the one that's a good fit for you and your family.
That's Southwest Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Amy Sollock discussing the benefits of joining Kansas 4-H. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.